Hello and welcome to TALRadio. At TAL, we connect those who are willing to give to those who are in need. My lovely audience and my wonderful listeners, it's a very special episode today because we would be talking a lot about you, me, and trust. So trust me, it's going to be an amazing episode. And as usual, let's welcome Andrew Talents. Andrew, welcome to TALRadio.
Thanks, Sandy. Lovely to be here.
Thank you so much. So today we would be talking about building trust within your team, the strategies and the practices for the same. So let me start by asking you, when you think about trust in a team, what does it truly mean beyond just reliability and performances?
And they're the two things that we tend to focus on in measuring trust. But if we think about how it feels, that probably gives us a better indicator, because we all know how it feels when we feel trusted or we trust somebody. So within a team context, the way that it tends to feel is it's safe. So it means that if we're in a team meeting, it means I can say what I think and what I believe, as opposed to worrying about what it is that I'm going to say. So that usually is one good indicator. It also means that if people trust each other within the team, there's usually more conflict that happens within the team. And some people don't like conflict as a word, and all conflict really is a disagreement between two or more people where there can be a discussion to come to an outcome. And yet so many people in teams avoid conflict because they don't trust how the message is going to be received. So that's the second thing. So it feels safe enough to be able to have a conflict and a disagreement. And I think the third thing really is about the recognition that if I make a mistake, so therefore I'm not necessarily reliable or always productive, if there's trust in the team, it means that there's an understanding that everyone is trying their best, and we're human beings, we make mistakes. So it feels safe and it feels okay to make mistakes because we all learn from them. So they're the three key ways that it feels different in a team when trust is established.
That was pretty deep, in fact. I'm sure nobody must have ever thought about it in the boardrooms.
Yeah.
So moving on, why do you believe trust is the foundation of high-performing teams, especially in today's fast-changing work environment?
I'd encourage all the listeners and the viewers to get hold of a book by Lencioni called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And it's a lovely story. It's not complex or necessarily research-based. It's a story about how a team develops over time in a business. And the first thing that Lencioni talks about in his book is we cannot become high-performing if we don't have an element of trust within the team. And the reason because of that is what I said earlier around conflict. So for every business that wants high-performing teams, the only way that they become innovative and different to other teams is by having a natural conflict where disagreement leads to commercial tension, which then leads to problem solving and real solutions for customers and employees. And that leads to a high-performing team. Now, there are other stages that Lencioni talks about, but if you don't get the trust right first, you can't then move through the other elements of commitment, managing conflict, performance, and also accountability. So these are the 5 elements that he talks about, and trust is the foundation. And yet, you and I both know that it's so lacking from many organizations and many teams.
True, absolutely. In fact, Andrew, I must really commend you for the fact that in every episode, I believe you always bring up a lovely book for our audience and for our listeners as well. I'm sure they must be wondering, do you really get time to, in a week or so when your life is so busy, you're always working with the leaders or the CEOs. So, how do you take out that time? I mean, it must be a little out of
I do have a time in the evening. I have my Kindle. It's the best thing that I ever got bought. It was a gift for me. And on that Kindle, I have thousands of books, and usually they're recommended to me in terms of, people I trust and say to me, you want to read this book. So that's probably, Lencioni is a lovely book because it's a story. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Certainly recommend that.
Lovely. Thanks a lot for that. So moving on, I think the next question is something that I generally tend to ask this during, when we are wrapping up the session, but somehow the context came right now from your experience as such. So can you share an experience from your leadership journey where trust or the lack of trust basically made a very significant, difference?
Let's talk about the lack of trust first and then how they changed that around. So a lot of people out there will be able to relate to this. So there was a founder I was working with who was very bright, had grown a business to a level where they could manage it effectively. And yet to get to the next level, they needed to be able to take the team with them in terms of some very difficult challenges they were facing in very difficult markets. And because there wasn't any trust established with the team, this individual was looking forward and moving forward very quickly with the agenda that they thought was the right thing to do without looking behind them to see if the team were there with them. And of course they weren't, because the trust had gone, because he promised to do certain things, he never did. He promised to make certain investments, he never did. He promised to actually make sure that people will be looked after when things got tough, and he never did. So people lost trust. They actually broke down that trust. So after some coaching and some insight from his perspective, he started to invest time with the team to actually coach them and ask them, what is it I need to do to rebuild the trust with you? Not to tell them to start trusting him, but to actually understand what it was. And for them, it's very simple. If he said he was going to do something, they just needed him to do it on time, on budget. And if they did that, they could actually rebuild the trust over time. And that's what happened in the next 3 to 6 months. And so the trust built. It does take time to build trust back up again. But then the team was with him and they were able then to move the business to a successful exit.
All right. So I would say this experience was actually all about lack of trust, but building trust over the time.
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome.
It takes time. Yeah.
True. So moving on, what are the key components of trust within a team itself?
Well, the key components really, first of all, and this happens very, very rarely, the whole team needs to feel what's called psychologically safe. So it means they know how to communicate with each other properly. They know not to necessarily interrupt each other when somebody's talking. They know not to put down ideas. There's a lovely framework, which if your listeners and again, viewers want to look at, it's called the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. It's a beautiful framework. And I think it's Richard Gottman, I think, that wrote about this. And basically, it's the way that we fail to build trust in our relationships in teams. The first is when we become defensive. The second is when we blame other people. The third is when we're sarcastic or show contempt for other people, which happens a lot in teams. And the fourth is when we just ignore people. So if those 4 things are present, it means that we cannot build trust within the team. So there are 4 things that need not be present. The final thing that's really important for the trust to exist within the team is that there are clear roles defined for each of those people within the team, and they have clear ways of telling each other when those roles are being overstepped. Again, in a very constructive way, not in a negative way, but in a way which is very clear. And that those people are held to account into those roles. So they're the main elements, again, in terms of trust being in a team that make it successful.
In fact, when you mentioned about the element which shouldn't be there, like conflict and sarcasm, I think most of the team actually have those components, don't they?
They do. And what that shows, which is really interesting, is, and this is what Gottman talks about with the 4 horsemen, is when that's present, it's just a human being being very unskillful in communication because they're not sure how to do it from a position of trust or assertiveness. So it's very normal. We all do it, and yet we don't call each other out for it. When there's trust in the team, we tend to call it out and say, look, we shouldn't be doing that. It's our responsibility. We shouldn't be blaming other people.
Right. So moving on, talking, with today's context, the work culture context, I would say, how does trust look different in remote or hybrid teams compared to in-person teams?
Really good question that's come from the hybrid working from COVID, really. And if you think before COVID, when people were in an office, the leader, the manager could actually see what people were doing, how they were doing it, how much time they spent in. The jackets were normally over the back of the seat to indicate they were in. So in a way, trust was built into the system just by purely seeing people, and therefore sometimes a bit of a fear factor that if I left at this point or wasn't present, that would be seen badly. That changed a lot during COVID, and then since then, where younger people in particular have said, well, look, this can work for me. I don't want to be coming in the office 3 days a week. If you want my services, then you're going to have to trust me to basically do what I say I'm going to do. Now, some organizations during hybrid working have actually illegally and without telling their employees put tracking software on the computers of their employees to actually measure how much work they do because they don't trust them.
True,
and it's not
true.
the people that shouldn't be trusted. It's because the lack of trust in the organization. There's very much a command and control type network within the organization. So the way that it's done properly now in remote or hybrid teams is setting clear guidelines right at the start of a week or a month about how the team's going to work together. Again, what's expected of each team member, what is not expected. So everyone's really clear about that, how people should communicate, how people should write emails, how people should actually respond to emails in a timely manner. And there's an agreement within the whole team about how that should be done. And then when people actually don't do those things, one of the team members calls it out and reminds them of what the framework said before that. So this is the only way that you can do this within remote teams, because you can't watch them all the time. You can't be prescriptive in the way you want them to work because they're going to do it in their own timeframes. So it comes down to setting clear rules and then the whole team holding each other to account with the direction from the leader. And again, it's not very well done in many organizations. It's one of the biggest challenges that they face at the moment.
So talking about trackers in the system, I think that gets me to my next question. Do you think trust is built more through actions or through communication?
I think there are two elements to this. I think the communication comes first. So the way in which someone says something to you will give you a level of indication about whether you trust what they've just said. So does it seem well thought through? Does it seem factually based? Does it seem logical? Does it really play to what I'm understanding at the moment and is understanding me? So I think the communication is really important to begin with. However, as we had with the previous example, if I've communicated to you effectively to manage your expectations, and yet then my actions are very different to that, that's where the trust usually breaks down.
Yeah.
So the trust doesn't normally break down in the communication. It's normally in the follow-up afterwards where I don't do the things I say I'm going to do, or I'm going to do them late. And you do that 4 or 5 times and it chips away. There's something lovely, again, another book that the listeners and viewers would have heard, which is Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Leaders. And in that book, there's a whole chapter on the trust bank. And what he calls about the trust bank is every time that I do something for you that I say I'm going to do, then I put $1 in the trust bank. And the trust builds up every time I do that. Every time I say I'm going to do something for you, then I don't do it, $1 comes out of the trust bank. And it's a really good way of thinking about it in various relationships, where the level of trust is in a relationship. And it's a lovely concept. And it's normally because we can't communicate it, it's because we don't do what we say we're going to do.
That's a lovely concept. I'm sure this is something that listeners can really take away, at least at this moment.
Yeah.
So moving on, what role does active listening play in making team members feel valued and trusted?
It's absolutely critical. And one of the things that a coach like me is taught when you go through a training course to learn about coaching is that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Oh.
And so many of us are very poor at active listening. So there are 3 levels of active listening. There is actually what we're doing now. The second layer is about really listening to the body and what the body is saying, because obviously we communicate through our body as well, and body language. And then the third is about what's not being said. So we can only listen to those 3 things if we're really present in the moment, which has been a theme for a lot of our sessions here on the channel, to basically say, I need to be fully present now to understand those 3 levels of what is really going on, so that I can play that back to the person. They feel understood, and that's how we build trust. One of the ways to build trust when we're doing that is if we understand what's being said to us in those 3 dimensions. It usually helps with the relationship if we can actually be vulnerable in that moment to maybe give an example about how we felt in the same way in the past. Give a story, give an example, talk about something where we felt exactly the same way, which might be a weakness or something we didn't do correctly. And sharing that with the individual who's just shared with us demonstrates the active listening and also makes them feel better understood.
I think 3 points that you just laid out really refer to so many episodes that we've done in the past, being in present. That's what
Yes.
you also mentioned, and the body language and understanding what is unsaid. It's really, really important, not just in a team, in a relationship, everywhere, I would say.
I agree.
So moving on, how can leaders really build trust within the team, irrespective of the results, and not really holding somebody accountable for it?
This comes back a little bit to one of the things we talked about. I think maybe it was last time. This comes down to the vision. So in every single organization, whether it's a profit-based organization or a not-for-profit organization, if we have set the vision correctly and the purpose as a leader and the team is bought into that, we're going to have ups and downs. We're going to have days that we perform, days that we don't perform. And it's the trust is almost like the glue. It's a lovely phrase that again is used by Covey that actually binds the team together to know that as we go through the hard times, because we're moving towards the vision, we can trust that next week will be another week and we can do something again to move closer to it. But it's only if we do the thing we talked about before, where when somebody underperforms or somebody makes a mistake, we don't blame, we don't judge, we accept that that's what happens. We're curious about why it happened and we learn from it and we integrate it into the team dynamic moving forward. So that's really important in terms of how trust can be still engineered when things are not going so well.
Okay, Andrew, I really wanted to ask you because you work so, with leaders all across the globe. So what I have observed, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think leaders are more optimistic about the results in the long run, whereas the team isn't so convinced about it. Is it true?
It is, and that's where accountability comes in again. So part of this is about the way that organizations are structured. So budgeting processes generally are geared up, particularly for privately owned organizations, to overachieve and stretch. And therefore, the leader usually has to put in a bigger number to satisfy the stakeholders to do that. Of course, the team deep down knows that number is not achievable because the team are the ones that deliver these numbers. So it's really important that the leader builds trust with the team to say, I know that you know that this number is something that's going to be very difficult for us to achieve, and I'm going to manage our stakeholders in terms of their expectations around this number. But at the same time, we need to find ways to get as close to that number as possible. So you are right. A lot of leaders don't take the time and effort to explain that to their team and to build trust around what they're trying to do. Too many just build the number and then expect the team to deliver it without any trust being in place. Yeah.
Very true. So moving on, what I really wanted to understand that, how can trust be maintained during periods of conflicts or high pressure, for performance and everything?
It's a really difficult thing to do. Most leaders don't do it very well. There needs to be an honest feedback system, really. We've talked in one of their episodes about feed forward, which is a concept where we actually give some feedback in the moment about things that are going well. So when things aren't going so well, it's really important that people feel almost like an honesty box. Do you remember the honesty boxes that we've had in various organizations? For people to put in ideas, I've spotted that this is happening, it's not really helping us, I think we can do this, and really trying to generate lots of ideas, because that's the only way through innovation, and again in conflict, where we can actually come up with some solutions that are going to take us in a different direction. It's one of the hardest things that leaders have to cope with. It takes time, and of course, as we've spoken before in the past, Sandy, not enough leaders create time and space to really work on these things. They just expect them to work miraculously just by hard work, and it doesn't always work that way.
I remember honesty box. I don't know if it still exists. I'm not
I think they do, yeah. I think they do. Yeah. And suggestion boxes.
I don't know, but most of the organization had this amazing thing of, you could be anonymous and still tell what you're really feeling about. So moving on, what is the best way to rebuild trust once it is broken down? Because it's a very normal human tendency to break trust, ask for forgiveness, and then, how do you rebuild that?
It's really hard, and most leaders probably find this the most difficult part of leadership, because there are three things that they need to do when trust is broken down. The first thing is they really need to be very curious, and they need to find out the reasons that the trust is broken down. And that is very difficult because it normally leads to criticism of the leader. So if I ask you, why don't you trust me anymore? The likelihood is you're going to give me some feedback that I'm not going to like because I've let you down in some way. So that's the first thing that the leader has to do. The second thing the leader has to do links into what you said. they must apologize. They must be real and not just say it, but really mean it. I didn't realize I was letting you down. I should have thought about this. I've been too busy, and I am sorry for that. Just saying sorry is amazing how far it can build trust back up. Because again, we're actually demonstrating empathy and compassion in that sense. And then the third, which is really important, the third is very interesting because a third option might be for a leader to say, look, what we're going to do is we're going to do this, 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 and this, and therefore I hope that you'll trust me more. Not every leader should do that, because what they should be doing is saying, okay, what is it that you need me to do now in the next 2 or 3 weeks that will help to rebuild the trust with you? Not me thinking about what I'm going to do as a leader. What is it that you need me to do as a leader to make sure we can rebuild the trust? And if a leader does those 3 things, they probably get a long way to starting to rebuild the trust, but it does take a long time. You've seen this with many reputations of businesses over the years. They take years to build in terms of trust from the consumer or the customer, and it just takes seconds for it to go, and they have to start building it again.
Very true. Very, very true. In fact, when you mentioned this word sorry, I don't know, somehow I felt, especially the teams really feel that, sorry, especially if a leader says sorry, it's almost like a therapy to your ears.
Yeah, absolutely. And then because we know they're a human being and we see that it's not necessarily just about the business and the performance. Yeah.
Very true. So let's move on. We've spoken so much about trust. So what is that one habit that every leader should practice on a daily basis to build trust within their team, irrespective it's an in-person or it's a hybrid, it's a remote culture?
So I think there are 2 things here that are key. So the first thing is for the leader to understand in all of their key relationships, and they're both senior relationships, peer relationships, and then the people beneath them as well. What are the expectations of that person in relationship with them? And what is it they need from the leader? Because if we have that, we've got real clarity. So what are you expecting from me? What do you need from me? And that doesn't mean that when you give me the answer, I'm going to give you what you need, because I might not be able to. But I've got real clarity about what it is you're expecting. There is no miscommunication. And then the second thing is for me to then be able to inform you and communicate to you what it is I can then deliver for you. Bear in mind what you've just told me. And it's not always a match. It sometimes is a mismatch, but I'm being very clear as a leader what I can do for you. And linked to that second point, it goes back to what we said before. Once I've told you that, I need to deliver on it. And that's it. It's very simple, not easy. It's different. It's not easy to do because we get so busy and we can't prioritize a lot of the time and things get taken away from us. But that's what leaders need to do to make sure they can be successful.
Amazing. So if you were supposed to, give an advice to somebody who's just climbing up this ladder of success, just into the new roles of the CEO, the CXO, whatever the level is, at the leadership level, very new to it. So what would you really advise them about building trust? What would be that one piece of advice to them?
It's so hard to do, but when you do it really well, it really does make a difference. So the one thing I would encourage them to do on the way up, it's harder when you're a really senior leader, but on the way up, I would really admit when you don't know how to do something. Because if you admit that you don't know how to do something and you're asking for help in how to do it, it shows vulnerability. It builds trust with the person you're asking that actually, okay, well, you've admitted you've been honest with that, you don't know how to do it, and you find out something new. And it's probably more expected at that level as you're learning. So don't just pretend that you know what you're doing, because once you start pretending you know what you're doing and then you don't do what you're supposed to do, the trust then moves away from you. So that's probably the one thing I would say.
Lovely. That is a very honest piece of advice, I must say. Awesome. So with this lovely piece of advice, I'm going to wrap up this wonderful segment on this lovely series called Self-Coaching. So Andrew, thank you so much for being a part of TALRadio, and thanks a ton to our lovely audience. And before we let you go, please, can you just wish our listeners and our audience Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Thank you so much. Have a great day ahead.